What is going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gaming, and well, here we are at the very end of the current console generation. We are on the cusp of the new console generation. The PlayStation 5 is several weeks away. Well, for me, I guess it's several months away because I don't need one yet, but it gives me time. And of course, what I'm going to do in this time is I'm going to sit here, I'm going to reflect, I'm going to ponder, I'm going to muse, I'm going to do whatever it is I feel like it because this is my channel. Now, having said all that, I currently, going forward, have no more PlayStation 4 exclusives left to buy. In fact, off the top of my head, there's only one game I will be buying on the PlayStation 4 going forward, and that's the Shin Megami Tensei 3 Remake, which comes out next year. So for all intents and purposes, the PlayStation 4 is pretty much done for me. And that gives me the perfect opportunity right now. It lets me look back at the last 7 years of the PlayStation 4, and it really gives me time to take pause and ask and answer what is the game of the generation for me for PlayStation 4. Now, of course, many people out there are going to be saying it's Spider-Man, many people are going to be saying it's Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War, but let's face it, we all know the real game of the generation is clearly Knack. But I digress. So, it's given me a time to spend, well, I guess it's a couple of weeks at this point, wondering what I have been playing constantly, what my mind has been on, what has had the biggest impact for me when it comes to PlayStation 4 games. Now, there are a couple of qualifiers I want to outline before we go on any further. One, multi-platform games do not count. The exception, of course, is if it's something like a remaster or if the game launched without the premise of a timed exclusivity. Let's, for example, say Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I've been very vocal about not liking, so will not be my game of the generation. But that one, of course, was announced with a 1 year timed exclusivity before it goes to other platforms. So that would be automatically disbarred from the list. But luckily, that doesn't matter because the game was garbage. Or at least it was a technical piece of garbage and a story piece of garbage for the last 2 chapters. But other than that, it was fine. Number 2, remasters and remakes do count and are eligible for this list, as long as they were previously Sony exclusive games, or the remakes slash remasters are exclusive to this platform, the PS4. In which case we'd be looking at stuff like Shadow of the Colossus remake, which I have mentioned before was one of the greatest games I've played on the platform. Could it be the defining game of the generation for me? That's a whole other story that we'll get into. And just to give an extra little example of number 1, just in case I wasn't too clear about it, something like Detroit Become Human would be eligible, because it did launch as a PlayStation 4 exclusive with no ever mention of timed exclusivity or eventually going multi-platform. Now, I'm not like many PlayStation owners. Many PlayStation owners live and die by their exclusive. Every single Sony exclusive game is a 99% out of 100 game. That's not the case for me. In fact, I dislike many of Sony's first-party IPs. I have no interest in Ratchet & Clank. I have no interest in Jak and Daxter. Uncharted is dead to me. Not even dead to me because I just don't care about it. I don't enjoy it. And then, of course, all their new stuff. God of War, I've never been into. The same with Horizon Zero Dawn. I mean, I have the PC port now in anticipation of my 3080, but I'm only getting it just because. It's the same with stuff like Ghost of Tsushima, a game that many have praised for many different reasons. I have zero interest in. It does not appeal to me. And don't even get me started about stuff like Days Gone. But essentially, what I can do is, while I do have several games that I've highly enjoyed, like for example, say, Shadow of the Colossus remake, it really comes down to 2 different games that it could potentially be. One of which is a bit surprising, but it has merits in its own way. So, the first one of these 2 games is Persona 5. Now, I haven't got a chance to play Persona 5 Royal just yet. I've had it since launch, but I never got around to it. And then after Persona 4 Golden came to PC, and I replayed that on there, I'm pretty sure I can't do Persona 5 Royal on anywhere that's not PC. But anyway, Persona 5, the original. This game blew my mind in so many ways. I had already played Persona 3 and 4. Hell, I'd even played most of Persona 1 as well. Not really a fair comparison considering they're vastly, entirely different games. But Persona 5 is such an amazing game in practically every single way that I now include Persona 5 in my top 10 games of all time. It's mentioned in the same list, and the same breath, and the same sentences as Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, Shenmue, Persona 4, Final Fantasy 6 and 7, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. You get my point. That is how much I love that game and how important it is to me. In fact, I realistically do want to try Persona 5 Royal. But right now, I'm holding out hope so I can get the better version of it. But base vanilla Persona 5, a game that arguably close comes to masterpiece level. And I even hesitate to put this on the list, simply because it also came out on PlayStation 3. However, this was several years after PlayStation 3's demise, so it doesn't really count, does it? But when we flip it over and look at the other game in question, well, this one is going to be a bit more divisive for many people, considering, oh, how can you think this is one of the defining games of the PlayStation 4 generation? How can you think this is the game of the PlayStation 4 generation when I list off what it actually is? Don't worry, I'm not going to milk this forever, but I will just a little longer. But the next game in question, before I do name it, the main reason I include this on here is this is a game I have consistently come back to, consistently played. Over the several years this game has been out, I've played it 2, maybe 3 times a year, every year without fail. As much as I love Persona 5, it took me over 100 hours to finish, and that's not something I can easily reinvest in. This other game is much, much shorter. It's a very different game and a completely different genre, and while it's an exceptionally high quality game, some people will still question why it's on this list. But regardless of that, I have kept coming back to this game and had fun with it every single time that I have done this. 2, 3, 4 times a year. That's right, every single time I have come back to The Last of Us Remastered. Not The Last of Us 2, absolutely not The Last of Us 2, but The Last of Us Remastered, a remastered version of a PS3 game. And still, having said all that, which how much I enjoy and love that game, I still disagree with many people about its legendary masterpiece status. But yet, here I am, talking about this game 6 years after remaster release, and 7 years after original release. And I'm mentioning it as one of my potential game of the generation for the PS4 games. I still disagree that it's the legendary narrative story masterpiece that everyone says it is, but I'm still absolutely 1% higher than Persona 5, giving this game my PS4 game of the generation. That is very, very strange for me. I never expected this. When I thought about this and started creating this idea several weeks ago, I was almost dead set I was getting Persona 5 as my game of the generation. But I thought about it more and more and more. And while I love Persona 5 more than pretty much every single way than The Last of Us Remastered, I would still almost consider The Last of Us Remastered the PS4 game of the generation, by a very, very slight margin. And the reason why this video is coming out before Cyberpunk is because 1, that game doesn't even apply to this list, and 2, I'll be playing it on PC, the best of the 5 platforms that will have it. So it's not like I'll be getting it on PS4 anyway. But that's it, there we have it. Now that I've finished milking it, The Last of Us Remastered beats out Persona 5 for PS4 Game of the Generation by about 1%. Now that you know my one, what's your PS4 Game of the Generation, and why?